Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. This is Orphanlast, aka Skylar Madison, and today I'm going to go ahead and possibly start a new video series. Every single video needs to have a thumbnail, and I spend massive amounts of hours making thumbnails, and it's kind of become this regular work of art that I do on a regular basis. And you can kind of see I did a little bit of tracing, but even with what I traced, the proportions on my mascot is different than the proportions of a normal human being, and so I changed it up a little bit. Pose is different. Where in the original photograph of me, which I took, my assets that I can use whatever way that I want, there are distinct differences and such like that. And with this video series, I'm not planning on making it like super high quality. It's just me working on a thumbnail, but that thumbnail is what I consider to be a bit of a work of art. And so I feel like I'm kind of cheating you guys because, my channel is centered on my artwork and me creating it, and you guys aren't even being cued in on it. And so, I just want to keep you guys cued in. I'm not going to, try to make the most professional voiceovers for this specific video series, because it's not really me offering tutorials or anything like that with the thumbnails. But you can kind of see me kind of working things out here and there. The face was pretty difficult because, I need to be able to make it look like my mascot. I need to make him look pretty good. And, it was just a lot of troubleshooting here and there. Sometimes you see me kind of draw out some lines that eventually I wind up erasing, but those lines are just to help me understand where each face or each contour of the face is, and then I wind up getting him to work in more of a way that I can understand geometrically, and then I wind up erasing the lines that get me to understand what's going on the facial features geometrically, and just keep the lines that are more identifiable as him on the screen. And so that's what I mainly focused on with that. And I'm really starting to become a real big fan of Affinity Designer, because it's really versatile with what you can do with it, and I'm just coming out with some really, really good images because of it. There are reasons why you would still use other pieces of software, and I do use other pieces of software, but it's all just kind of just one step at a time, just case by case basis, basically. You see me just kind of customizing each and every single line on the composition, and this can be pretty time consuming, but it is pretty rewarding, actually. And some people may feel as though, well, why would you sculpt these lines when you could just draw them? And it's nice to be able to come back and just refine the lines a little bit. And everyone does this. It doesn't matter if you're working with Photoshop, Affinity Photo, or what have you, or Krita. You always come back to your line work and refine it in some way. It's just a different workflow instead of Affinity Designer, or whenever you're working with vectors and such like that. And once I feel like I'm done with the line work, what I wind up doing is I wind up bringing up the reference photograph again, and I look at how the lighting is on the photograph, and I try to replicate the lighting as best as I can. Now, in the end, I wound up actually flipping the image of the mascot, so that he's on the left side rather than the right side. And so technically, where the highlights are and where the shadows are, they're not quite in the right place, but the light source is up, and it was an overcast day. So I'm not really too concerned about the slight imperfection with the lighting. No one's ever going to notice that, the lighting is a little bit different than what's inside of the scene, because it's not really, very in your face. The light source is up, maybe a slightly different direction, but What I didn't like is how there's a timestamp in the bottom corner of every thumbnail. And if you actually pay attention, that timestamp that says how long your video is on your thumbnail, it can be fairly small, depending on what platform you're looking at the thumbnail on. If it's on a computer, it tends to be pretty small. But if you go into the search field and type in, the name of the video, and you look at the thumbnail again, you'll see that the timestamp is actually larger. And so there's like 4 different versions of the thumbnail. And if it's on mobile, whether you're just looking at the thumbnail in the suggestion feed or whether or not you're looking at it on my channel or something like that, it has a specific size for that timestamp. And it's different on the search field, and on computer it's the same way. 2 different versions, I believe, for each one of those. And so you want to make sure that the composition works as best as humanly possible, considering the largest size that timestamp is going to be. And the design of your and composition of your thumbnails wind up basically being governed by that timestamp. It's something that basically all of your decisions in composing your thumbnail are all going to be based on that, because you are forced to have that in your composition. I may not be drawing it at all inside of my thumbnail, but I know it's going to be there. And I actually have a file inside of my Affinity Designer project, which is a template of the thumbnail, and occasionally you'll see me turn that specific layer on here and there so that I can see how it's working with the composition. I really didn't like how the largest size that timestamp is basically designed to be. I didn't really like how much it covered up, or it had the potential of covering up, my mascot's torso, and it kind of confuses the pose that my mascot is in. And the last thing that you want inside of a design is confusion, because that's considered to be something like instead of having contrast, you're having conflict. So I wanted to avoid that, and it was easy enough. All I needed to do was flip my mascot and move him to the left rather than the right, even though this is kind of a little bit of a departure from the original composition of my reference. I'm okay with that. His hand is kind of pointing a little bit too low, but in the end, regardless, when I flip it, his hand is still pointing at a rock, and it's still kind of pointing up towards the thing that I want people to be paying attention to inside of the thumbnail, which is what I do for a living, the title of the video, but also the subject matter of what I do for a living, making faux rock. So he's still pointing at the rock. And, the shadows and highlights just come out excellent. Just really excellent inside of Affinity Designer, and they're editable. Every single shadow and highlight is editable. It's not just some selection that you select and then deselect and then, it's all said and done. You can go back to previous shadows and highlights and adjust them if you really want to. And so that's something that I really like. You see me throw what I created there into my mascot repository, and I'll be adjusting a few things later on down the road, because who knows, I might wind up using this specific pose later on in the future. And so you guys have actually seen the thumbnail. You guys have seen it. You guys know what it looks like and everything, so I don't need to have it blasted up on the screen at the very tail end. If you want to see the final result, it's inside my channel. And if you want to know what the video is about, just feel free to watch that video. I usually experiment with how the text winds up being, and there's a few last-minute decisions a lot of the time when I see the thumbnail miniaturized, and so you know, not everything about making a thumbnail is going to be included in this series, but you get the point. The majority of making the thumbnail is included in this series. Anyways, guys, that pretty much concludes it for this video. If you guys enjoyed it, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. And if you'd like to get more notifications from me, feel free to click on the bell or follow me on Twitter. A link is in the video description below. And if you guys would like to see more of my content, feel free to click on anything appearing on the screen right now.